how likely is it that illegal immigrants will become undocumented voters? I have a subscription account over on Patreon. There are top supporters that have been here since the beginning. They were super excited when they heard that you were coming on, and we got a whole slew of questions.
All right, let's do it.
That's one of the things I do is I give them the opportunity to ask each guest a question. So I got 2 questions for you. This one's from Kevin Stoltz. He wants to know if you're going to be the next attorney general if Trump gets into office.
It's humbling to ever be considered for any government position because, like you, we did the job as a service to the American people. That's what we signed up for. None of the media exposure, any of that stuff we ever cared about. And so for me, I told President Trump, the same thing when he decided he was going to run again. I said, I'm all in to help you win, whatever it takes. I'm your guy. And on November 5th, should he win, hopefully he wins, and he wants to have that conversation, it's up to him. He's the president, he's the commander-in-chief, and he gets to arrange the deck chairs as he wants. But for him, I'd go back in.
Do you think that's where you would be best utilized?
I don't know. I mean, that's like an impossible question. I have no idea where that sequencing is going to land. And it also depends on all the other folks that are surrounding the president and the team he goes in with. So, whether it's an intel position or something in defense or whatever, who knows? It's the one thing I've learned about these senior leadership positions, being around so many of them, is you don't have to be the subject matter expert of that institution to run it effectively. You almost don't want to have that leadership there because they're too tied into the everyday operations. And then what they do is they micromanage everything. You need to have someone who is familiar and has operated with it, but also at the same time who's managed a big ship and can understand the most important thing that Trump taught me was execute the mission and then get the hell out of the way for the people who signed up to do the job. And so that's the thing I learned. So if I go back and he wants me back and wherever he wants me, I'll tell your viewers as soon as he makes that decision, if he does.
Right on. When do people generally find out if they're going to be in the cabinet or on the staff?
The funny thing about my career is I guess I'm in politics, but I never was, right? And then I got out and people are like, you're in politics. I'm like, well, I've never run for office. I'm never going to run for office. I'm not in the RNC, the DNC, or whatever party, this, that, or the other things, apparatus. But I guess just because of the close positions I've held with the president and continuing to serve, I've learned that whatever or however it was done is not Donald Trump's way. So I think that's what's appealing to him, to the American public about him. And so I don't know when he's going to stack it. Even though I know him as well as I do, and I talk to him all the time, he probably has his cabinet laid out in his mind. He's just not going to tell people. And he's going to do what he does, which is continue to ask probably everyone he sees about their opinions, and he might change his decision on it. So the vice president's the probably best example. That came down to the last second, the last day, last wire.
Yeah.
There's a couple of folks in contention, but he made the decision, after hearing everything from everyone.
No kidding. So, I'm just curious, how do you feel about that? There's no time to switch gears in your head.
None.
Right?
Yeah. So
you just, hey, we're going to have you for X, Y, and Z, and we're starting yesterday. So, or is there somewhat of a, hey, we're looking at you, to fill this slot and start getting your mind right?
Yeah, there's some leeway for everybody. So what the campaign does, and that's whatever they manage over there, is they send out vetting packages to, I think it was 8 people for President Trump's vice president candidate. So they knew they were being looked at. They had to submit this massive amount of information. The campaign leadership with the president looks at it, and then they make a decision. So the guys and gals they're on notice for at least a month that this could be your deal. And I don't know the inner workings on the VP thing. That's probably just like anything else. People are lobbying for you. You may be lobbying directly. You may be doing media. You may be on the road with the president. I mean, a lot of these folks were at President Trump's rallies. A lot of them were doing surrogate work for him. So I guess, in my opinion, I think he did it the best way possible. He auditioned them in front of the American public. There was no sleeper candidate. It's not like anyone in the top 3 or 4 or 5 was someone people hadn't heard of. They were all over the country with President Trump. They were doing TV interviews. They were very vocal and very public. And so I think the president was able to say, I have a wide range of opinions coming at me for these folks. And he was able to use that info.
Interesting. Next question's from Paul. I think this is something on everybody's mind. How likely is it that illegal immigrants will become undocumented voters?
It's probably already happening. I mean, whatever you think the number is, it's at least 10 million, if not 15 million, right? And you've seen liberal states go out and say, we're going to house illegal immigrants. We're going to give them IDs. And we're going to help finance whatever needs they might have for their families and themselves. And so you got to ask yourself, what's the point of all that? Like, what are you bringing all these people here for? Putting aside the fact that some of them commit the most atrocious crimes we've seen in modern history. What is the point of that from the Democrats? And it's because, this is the weapon I think they're going to use. They've studied this for a while. They know President Trump, in my opinion, has the best policy, the best agenda. And he's literally a president of people, from Hulk Hogan to Dana White to rock stars to movie stars to everyday Americans, the military, and to people that serve in government. They just love his style of leadership. And so I think the Democrats are smart enough to say, well, we got to figure out a new way to rig the election. They caught us on 51 Intel letter. They caught us on Russiagate. So now I think what you'll see is some of these swing states come in, and that's what people don't realize. It's not the federal government that controls federal elections. It's a state government. Every state applies its own laws. In my home state of Nevada, there's no voter ID. I went to vote, and I broke out my ID, and they go, we don't need that. I'm like, how do you know it's me? Also, not to mention the fact that you sent me 2 mail-in ballots. And so I could vote 3 times. And the system is not secure. And say you have 5% of the illegals, and say, let's use a conservative number of 10 million, right? 500,000 people. The last 2 elections were decided by 54,000 votes in 4 states. You don't need a lot. And that's the scary part.
Wow. So, I mean, at this point, this may be a stupid question, but if you get 2 mail-in ballots and nobody's checking your ID, I mean, is it even illegal to vote more than once these days?
It's supposed to be, but there has never been a process to question, the state-by-state electioneering methods and rules and laws. We had the, what was that famous Bush v. Gore, the paper ballot, I forget what you call it, issue, and then it went to the Supreme Court. But that was one state in one election. And so, I don't know how you get people to enforce those rules, because it's up to the state Secretary of State and the state Attorney General. Are we going to look at it or are we not going to look at it? Well, they're not going to look at it in Michigan or Minnesota. They're not going to look at it in Pennsylvania. They're not going to look at it in Georgia. Georgia's been very public saying, we're not going to look at any of this. And so if your elected officials aren't going to look at it, what's your alternative?
So there's legitimately nothing stopping somebody in Nevada from just voting and going to the back of the line, and voting and going to the back of the line, and voting and going to the back of the line, is there?
So the one last measure that people have is bringing private suits, civil suits in the states. So, for instance, in Nevada, we are bringing multiple lawsuits to purge the voting rolls, right? So people think, I'm not the election expert. I can't talk to you about machines or ballot, whatever. It's not my wheelhouse. But before all of that are ballots. And before all of that is who gets a ballot? Who gets one mailed to you from Carson City for us, right, from Reno? Everybody that's on the voting scrolls. Okay, well, let's take all the dead people off.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, Share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.